According to the most recent statistics provided by RAINN, which stands for Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, a person is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds in the United States. 1 out of every 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. For men, this number is about 3%, or 1 in 33. First nationally observed in 2001, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, or SAAM for short, is observed each year in the month of April by community-based organizations, rape crisis centers, government agencies, businesses, campuses, and individuals who plan events and activities to highlight sexual violence as a public health, human rights, and a social justice issue, and reinforce the need for prevention efforts. In observance of SAM, the Minority Eye sat down with Ashley Young of Everyday Wellness to discuss the impact of sexual assault on victims' lives and their mental health, as well as to hear firsthand accounts from survivors who have become thrivers. Ashley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Great, thanks for asking. Thank you for agreeing to sit down with me again. I know we had a great conversation last time about suicide prevention. We got a lot of comments from the viewers, and I want to thank you for agreeing to sit down with me again, especially with this month. Can you tell us a little bit what's so important about this month?
Sure, yeah. So April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and also called SAM. SAM is an annual campaign to bring awareness to sexual assault, awareness, prevention, and also talks about the risk factors, and also inspire those that may be struggling to seek the help that they need within our communities.
We have 2 people today joining us. Tell me who we have with us today.
Sure. So first we have Darius. Darius is an entrepreneur, veteran, chef, phenomenal chef, and also a survivor. So thank you, Darius, for being with us today. And we also have Tori. Tori is an entrepreneur, owner of Abundant Birthing Services, and also a survivor. So thank you, Tori. Thank you.
All right. Let's start. Ashley, if you start, what typically is talked about this month of April?
Right, so we talk about, a lot of survivors share their stories during this month. We bring awareness to victims and or survivors, depending on how they identify themselves, just to normalize the struggle of being a survivor of such trauma. Sexual trauma has so many degrees. There's childhood sexual trauma, there's rape, there's molestation, there's a lot of varying degrees of which someone may encounter these traumas. And so the Sexual Assault Awareness Month is to highlight and bring awareness to all of that. And also there's some events that educate the community. There are some events that survivors get together to fellowship. Really, it's empowering the survivors to let them know that they're not alone.
We hear a lot about sexual assault and things in the news, and in society today we talk a lot about trauma. And sexual assault is one of those things that has a lasting impact on individuals who are victims. Could any of Tori, I'll start with you. Can you talk about how it has impacted your life?
Definitely. Being a survivor has placed a lot of anxiety in my life. I, at one point in time, could not sleep for worry that it was going to happen again. It has impacted my relationship in a way where when we first were together, I didn't really think that I had value, and always would ask him, do you love me? Do you love me? Repeatedly, because of my anxiety from my trauma. It's definitely impacted my trust in people, and especially people that look like my rapist. So it's definitely something that hits hard, and in my instance, probably was about 8 years ago, and I'm still dealing with a lot of the feelings of inadequacy that came with that.
Darius?
I believe that just going through childhood traumas, and even as an adult, I think it psychologically it changes you in your head. When you go through it as a kid, kind of puts you in a position to show you the uglies of the world before you need to be exposed to those things, and it just changes you as a person. I grew up in a small country town, and a lot of the uglies that was happening on the roof that I lived in, and it was just a bad time in life. It changed me as a person. It made me a great father to my kids, and really just kind of made me want to just keep them right here. It definitely affected my personal relationships a lot. We get it. I know that's another question. We get into that for sure.
Ashley, want to go to you now. What are some of the things or some of the signs of trauma that we should be looking for in family members or friends? And kind of, what are some of the things, if somebody's out there dealing with trauma, what are some of those kind of things they can do to kind of help mitigate that?
Well, I would say, and maybe Darius and Tori, you may agree, is that I don't know if we ask the questions a lot as parents. I don't know your experience or maybe your experience that we think to ask those difficult questions with relatives being in the house. Checking in with our kids. Teaching them what the no-no areas are and maybe checking in. But I think that sometimes with kids, you're not really able to tell. There may be some isolation. You may see some self-harming in middle age or adolescence, but then you may see irrational behaviors. But that sometimes is hard for an adult to be able to pinpoint that there's sexual trauma. And so I think asking, if I had to say, asking the question in a safe environment, again, it's almost like suicide. You don't want to dumb it down and say, you're not doing anything stupid. Did anybody touch you? You don't want to say it in such a harsh way that a kid would not want to respond. But you want to say it in a gentle and caring way, can you talk to me if anybody may have touched you inappropriately, or maybe checking in with your friends and say, have you experienced any assault or trauma? I noticed that you've shut down and maybe you've been in isolation, or maybe you go from wearing, normal clothes to very bigger clothes, because you just want to disappear. And so I think all of those things, you're looking for changes in behaviors, but not being afraid to ask the question. I don't know if in your experiences, maybe if someone maybe would have checked in or asked questions more often, maybe you would have not felt as alone.
Yep, absolutely.
Darius, I want to go back to you now. When we talk about sexual trauma, we never really talk about men. You never hear that conversation, and a lot of times we think that, well, it doesn't happen to men, or a man or a boy should be strong enough to fight it all. Can you talk a little bit about how, when you were younger, how that weighed on you as a young man?
It was heavy. It made me angry. I took a lot of that anger out on people. When I was trying to get as involved with sports as I could, so baseball, I was an all-star, football, basketball, soccer, even as an artist, I grew up drawing, painting, doing all of those things just to take me away from the things I dealt with as a kid, and it made me like a warrior at a young age, long before I was ready for that as a person. That's really it. I think that ultimately, just like I said before, I think it changes you genetically, and it equips you to be able to deal with just about anything, and that's not always the healthiest thing. I've dealt with stuff, even in my adult life, where it's like, oh, I've been through worse. I've been through worse as a kid, and I don't want to live my life like that anymore. So once I got to a place in my healing where I could talk about this. I grew up in an older household, so my mom, she'd be 70 this year, she'll be 70 this year, and I was adopted, so, older people, all due respect, don't always agree with us millennials being vocal about the things that happen in our lives, et cetera, et cetera. So growing up, I didn't have a voice because I always felt like if I talk about this, I'm not gonna have a place to live. So and I wasn't able to convey that to my parents now till last year, and I got the exact response that I thought I was going to get. So I knew I had to get to a place of my healing before I could come out with that before I can say, look, Ma, you know, I'm older now, I want to talk about this, you know. And I never got the respect or the answer that I felt like I was, you know, that I deserved as an adolescent, you know. And I think every little boy that goes through that, they want that, you know, regardless if you're 40, regardless if you're 10, every little boy wants to, you know, I'm sorry that happened to you. What can I do to help? You know, so that changed me. It made me really hard on the inside, you know, and it affects so much until you deal with that trauma. It'll deal with you.
Ashley, I want to go back to you now. In your experience, have you seen in dealing with victims of sexual assault, do young men often display the same symptoms as of women, or are the effects different?
Well, I would say it's harder sometimes to detect if young men have been assaulted. Again, it's cultural norms, and again, the message that's been communicated to men, and particularly young black men, about, you know, you got to be strong, you got to be, you know, the message communicated across both genders, but particularly for men and young boys, you have to be strong, you know, we don't display weakness. And no one really even looks through, or I don't say no one really does, but very few people look at young men through the lens of sexual trauma, right? They may think of other things that may be going on behaviorally, things going on at home, maybe divorce. But I would say that in the parents that I've worked with, you know, I'm always introducing the idea, you know, have you ever considered that there may be sexual trauma? And the answer typically is no, you know. And so I think this is it's a disadvantage. Safety isn't always established. Again, we may protect our young girls, you know, from people, but we don't exactly always think about protecting our young men from, you know, the drunk uncle or of these things. And so I think there's a lot of education that needs to go into on how we need to protect our children generally, and have the conversation across both genders, all genders, you know, to be inclusive with that. And so I would say that it's harder to detect, but more so due to cultural norms and how the environment currently exists.
Thank you for that. I want to talk about, I think both of you mentioned the word relationships. How has, and Tori, you mentioned a couple things. How has that assault affected your relationships?
So my husband is the only serious romantic relationship I have been in. After my sexual assault, I was pretty promiscuous, trying to find validation in sex consensually, because of the value I felt that was stripped away when I was assaulted. I think with my relationship with my husband, there were a lot of sleepless nights, making me feel safe, a lot of me worrying that he didn't love me, he was going to throw me away, because I felt worthless. Very, very difficult to deal with and manage and sit with those emotions and process and be able to be vulnerable with him and actually tell him what was going on inside. He didn't know for the first 6 months of our relationship, and I feel that was a disservice, you know, to us, because I would have panic attacks crying, and I could not tell him why, and properly communicate what was going on. But yeah, so that's really the only relationship that it has impacted. Everybody else around me, my friends, my siblings, have been very caring and there for me in regards to what I needed to process when I was ready.
Darius, how about you?
Can you repeat the question again?
Well, we talk about, and both of you mentioned it opening about relationships.
Okay,
How
gotcha.
does it impact relationships?
I think relationships, wow.
And as a man,
I gotta be honest. I haven't been successful in relationships. I'm 30 years old now. I haven't been successful in it, and a lot of it was just right now today, just trying to get to a good place to where that makes sense for me. I think that as men, a lot of us, we're ego driven and pride is involved. So when you meet a woman and you really might like her, you might be like, I don't think she's gonna look at me the same if I say that this happened to me. So, you know, it creates a small ball inside of you that like snowballs over time. And if you can't get to know this person, if they can't get to know you if you never been honest about what happened to you, right? So, you know, fast forward now today, I can talk about that, talk about the things I've been through. I haven't been 100% successful, haven't been able to hold on to that, you know, and I never desired marriage as a kid. Never desired to have kids, none of that, because I never want to have to carry that from my kids if they ever went through it, you know, and I never wanted to have to be vulnerable and tell a woman that I loved that I had my innocence taken before I was 10 years old, you know. So it creates a small monster on the inside of you. And you know, just like her, like, you know, I can talk about hypersexuality where you go through these periods, all ego driven, right? Because you don't want to be like, you know, I had a male take my innocence from me as a kid, you know, as an actual family member take that innocence from you as a kid. And you go through life and you just think, well, I gotta hit this and I gotta do this and I gotta have sex with this person. If I do this, if I have sex with this amount of women, then that fixes the problem, right? But all you do is like, you also bring in their energies as well. So now you not only carrying your traumas, the heavy load, you carrying everybody's load that you done shared a piece of yourself with, you know. So that taught me a lot as well about being, you know, practicing spiritual hygiene and not wanting to just have sex with somebody just because they was pretty or just because they liked me or stuff like that. So
and because you can cook.
Right. And you know, that's another whole story. But it's the truth though. It's the truth. And it you know, it just as far as relationship goes, I'm working on being a better me so I can be that husband and show up for my kids in the way I need to show up for them and stuff like that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you said you hadn't been successful in relationships, but you said it made you a better father. How so?
Because I can monitor everything that my kid's doing, you know, and I have those conversations with my oldest. You know, she'll be 8 this year. Like, Lily, everything good at school? You want to talk to daddy about anything? You know, ain't nobody bothering you in any form or fashion. We just went through it 2 months ago. We just went through it at school. Went through the same thing, and it's like, I don't want history to repeat itself, you know. So that made me cautious. That made me want to guard my kids with everything in me, especially a little girl. You know, I couldn't imagine having to carry that. So I always make sure, like my daughter just went to go live with her mom, but these last 4 years, she been with me. You know, she been with me. I could watch everything she was doing. I was at every cheerleading practice, every event that she was doing, and that's how I was coping with it. That wasn't always the healthiest either. I don't want to have to monitor every single thing that she does as an adolescent, you know, just so that she doesn't have to go through the same things I went through.
Thank you for sharing. Ashley, do you want to add anything to that? Relationships being such an important part of our daily lives.
I think they both did an excellent job. I think the one thing I would add is that, you know, and it may be a question, but the core beliefs that are developed, that are birthed out of these traumatic experiences, you know, they look like I'm not worthy, they look like I'm not good enough, they look like, you know, I'm not capable, right? And people think that they only shape maybe relationships or things like sexual encounters, but they shape any experience that is intimidating. And so that cloud over your head of I'm not good enough can show up in a boardroom, can show up in entrepreneur endeavors, but it was birthed out of trauma. Right, out of our sexual experiences. And so people like to box that in, and it's not the case. I can walk in and maybe I don't feel heard at a major meeting, right? That not feeling heard can be indicative of me trying to share my voice at 8 years old and not feeling heard then, or not me sharing my abuse at 20 years old and not being heard by my mom and my family then. And so the events can look so different, but they were birthed out of our traumatic experiences. So I just wanted to kind of add in how that may shape all of our encounters.
Well, I want to put the question to Darius and Tori. Do you feel that what you went through has affected your core beliefs and how you see the world? Or
Oh man.
Yeah.
That is, I have goosebumps because it's so true, so real for me. I'm someone who struggles with imposter syndrome a lot. And I think that's because, and just now sitting here reflecting on who I was when I was 22, when it happened, I'm still very strong-minded, but I think some of that was taken away from me. A lot of it was, and replaced with questioning my abilities and not thinking that I was worthy or deserving of not only love but success and good things. Just like didn't think I was deserving of good things to come to me. I think if you let the trauma exist in you, because it lives in your body, and hold on to that, it is going to eat you alive. And it will take hold, and you'll become someone that you don't want to be, or you didn't see yourself being, all because of this trauma, and it's shaping how you think of yourself. I think I am definitely working through it, and I've spent a lot of years processing it and getting better, but there's still times when I'm very angry. And I think it's time for me and others who are dealing with these sort of issues to honor their emotions and their anger and let them feel it and address it, and then be able to replace that core belief of unworthiness, undeserving, that says that I am enough.
That's good.
I think just like I spoke about sports and being an artist and doing all those things growing up. When I was growing up, I always wanted people to see that when they saw me. I wanted them to see my art. I wanted them to see how many points I could score in a basketball game, all these other different things. And even in my adult life is entrepreneurship, right? And I always said, if I just get this business, if I just have this amount of money, this house, this car, whatever, that none of that stuff, all that stuff would go away, and I wouldn't have to look at myself and not feel good about the things that I was doing, right? Like, so until you deal with those things, none of the things you're doing on earth, like you guys might see, if you click on social media, if you see whatever, a lot of people see a completely different version of, and that's the version that is displayed to the world, but on the inside, it's like, man, ain't nothing, I ain't did nothing. People telling you they proud, and you can't even receive it because of that imposter syndrome. You can't even receive what that congrats and pats on the back. And even when you do receive it, it's like, well, yeah, you said thank you, or you said I'm proud of you, but what do you really mean by that? And it's just a thing that, so I still catch myself sometimes, even when people tell me they're proud of me and tell me that they're happy for me, it's like, yeah, whatever, I still catch myself sometimes, because some of it is not genuine. Let me be clear on that. Some of it don't be genuine, but a lot of it be genuine. People that really want to see you win, see you want to come up out those dark places, and you got to get past those dark, come out of that dark place in order to deal with that trauma on the inside of you and stuff like that. Yep. So, and I always said that now looking back, like I had to close my store just so I could deal with me. I was trying to run this business, trying to be full-time dad, trying to be over here mentoring these kids, and it's like, dang, DJ, you got to take care of you. You can't pour from an empty well. And so this year I'm just committed to really locking in on my culinary, but really focusing on completely healing. I'm aware of everything that's happened. Now I just got to heal it. So that's where I'm at now with it.
Appreciate that. That gives me to my next question. in a society now that is hyper aware, for lack of a better word, woke, supposedly. How do you guys feel that society is dealing with helping and being there for survivors of trauma, and especially people of color?
I think there's a big push to believe survivors. I think that's something that I've been seeing a lot. You know, when people, like, things come up in the news, celebrities or whatever, I think people are being held more accountable for their actions and how they're treating other people, how they're reacting to, like, you can't just say like a rape joke or something. And or just the other day, the baby was forcing a woman to kiss him. And it's like, and now the conversation is, why would you do that without consent? Whereas before it'd be like, you would be so lucky for the baby to kiss you, you know? So I think people
Perpetrator focused.
Yeah. I think people are beginning to hold the world more accountable, even in like small circles of friends. And yeah.
I think to piggyback off of that, I think, you know, people like Ashley and just different people with that platform to give people a voice, you know. Like just piggybacking on what she said, a lot of the stuff that, you know, was deemed cool at one point, you got social media now that's, you know, highlighting those things and holding people accountable, you know. So, you know, I think that's really, I think that, you know, social media plays a big part in people telling their stories. Even Lifetime, I watch Lifetime, you know. I'm probably one of the very few men. I watch Lifetime on Sundays and Saturday nights, you know, listening to different stories, cutting on YouTube and listening to people voice these same stories, tell the truth, and, you know, tell how they persevered, you know, through, you know, and was resilient through those periods, for sure. Yeah. So I think that, you know, social media plays a strong part in that. Just giving people a voice. We got hundreds of podcasters out that give people a chance to say, this happened to me, but this is what I made from it. So, you know, you can do it too if you've been through that, you know. So I think that that side of highlighting it, that's good for us to be able to see, you know, even for me, you know, like, I don't want people to just look at me and see like, yeah, right, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to just see, like, I want you to see, like, look, you know, I went through that, but this is what it became of it, you know. My dad went through it, you know, and he's not here with us anymore, you know, God bless the dad, but, you know, if he had a voice, I probably would have picked mine up at a younger age, you know. I probably could have picked it up young. I probably could have picked up some of the traits that I need to be a man, right? So, you know, I think that social media now definitely gives everybody a voice, you know what I'm saying? And that's probably the best blessing of social media, people that use it for the right reasons. A lot of people don't use it for all the right reasons. So
Thank you for that. Ashley, I want to put that question to you as well, because you're in the field. What are we doing a better job today? And if not, what more needs to be done?
I think we're doing a better job because we're willing to have the conversation. I think that people will be freed by, you know, these two telling their stories. I believe there will be empowered. I think, you know, before it's like it just didn't happen, right? And because no one talked about it, right, then maybe I'm just by myself, right? Or was it real, right? And I don't know how many times that survivors are like, man, like, I gave consent to the movie, I gave consent to this, and so they carry guilt and responsibility. Or, you know, I was very friendly, you know. And so I would say that speaking forward or coming forward in these conversations now are changing the dynamics. I know it's changing the dynamics culturally, as a personal experience. I told my story as a young adult to my family, and it freed generations. I didn't know the extensiveness of sexual trauma that went back generations, right? Christmas is no longer the same. You know, I disrupted all of that. You know, and it's just nothing is the same anymore. And that we carry the weight of that, right? We know that when we come forward, things will change, especially with family dynamics, you know, and as children, they're very wise. They understand. I knew that growing up, that sharing my story was going to disrupt a father, that someone I love, the only father that they've ever known, right? I knew that. 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, right? Carrying the weight of the person I love. And so I think that, you know, sharing the story also frees other people. For me, it freed people well beyond my age for generations and gave people a voice, right? And so I think that we have to continue with this. You know, there's going to be some young boy watching this that may then have a conversation. There may be some young lady that see this and like have the conversation because they don't feel like they're alone. I think part of it is that you feel very alone because it's not talked about, nor do anyone assume that it can happen.
All right, thank you for that. And that brings me to my last question. Thank you both for being here and sharing your experience and your story. The question I have now, how did you get to this point? What, you know, was it therapy? Was it, you know, what helped you get to this point? Because somebody, like Ashley said, somebody could be watching. And so I want them to know what the end looks like. So.
You want to go first?
Sure. I've been in therapy for, I'd say, steadily since 2019. Actually with Ashley. Okay. So just to plug Everyday Wellness if someone needs to know. But no, seriously, I was forced to confront a lot of my feelings that I was not sitting with. I thought that I was okay because I was able to just move past it, and I was, you know, it wasn't impacting my life in a major way. I could hold a job, I could have a relationship, you know, in any way that was, you know, debilitating. But the panic attacks still came, and it was from not sitting with my feelings, not processing, and that took a lot of time, and processing the anxiety when it comes took a long time to learn. Dismantling that hate I had internalized for myself and that guilt I held because I was assaulted by a known sexual partner. So I felt like I did this to me. And just deconstructing that anger and being able to speak on it and say that it's okay for me to hate this person. I don't use that word freely, but in this instance, like, my life, it's important for me to acknowledge that my life was forever changed, but it does not have to be for a bad thing. Right. It's been changed, and through sitting with the emotions and processing, I'm better for it.
There, and please, because black men, you know, want to know what make, you know, we handle, we keep everything in.
Yeah. I'm a real, like, very emotional guy. You know, I cry a lot during the week. I feel like part of that's attached to me just being a creative, being an artist, however you want to dress that up. But I think that I got here through, you know, through my art, you know, my version of art is culinary, right? Back in 2019, I probably went through one of the worst breakups you could name, you know, and I really had to I was the reason why, you know, and it was like, dang, that was me, this was me, I gotta figure out what happened, you know, but, you know, once I learned that awareness about myself, learn where I was in my healing. I started going to therapy back in 2016, post-deployment, Kuwait. I started wanting to learn myself, and you know, even though I was practicing ways that were not healthy, all of it wasn't healthy, I was just trying to be a better version of myself and trying to be a good dad for my kid, you know. So, you know, my oldest daughter, Layla, she is probably the pivotal point in my healing. having to be responsible for somebody else's feelings and their emotions as a kid, it just changes you and makes you want to look at things completely different. But that breakup that I went through, it changed me, and it changed how I view relationships. It changed who I allowed to have access to me. And honestly, that's where between that and culinary, I want to be one of the greatest chefs ever, right? So I said, I can't be that if I'm carrying that. You can't be that. You cannot be that. I didn't get better at my culinary skills until I got past those ugly parts of me that I was just refusing to deal with since I was a young kid, And once I started being aware of my feelings and where I was in my healing, it's like, all right, well, DJ, give yourself some grace, And once I started to allow that grace come into my life, things got better. And for a long time, cooking was, especially during COVID, I was just cooking. I was cooking every day, cooking every day. I was cutting hair. I was having people come over. I cut hair too, So, it was just something that I always did. Just so I've been cutting hair since the 8th grade, and. It was another thing that I did so I didn't have to think about what was happening when I had to go home, So.
And you put all this in a book?
Yes.
Your trauma?
It is. It absolutely is. So.
Thank you, Ashley, because that leads me to the next question I was going to do. Both of you have mentioned several times entrepreneurship, art, and it. So please, and there's you can go ahead. Tell us a little bit about what you do now, in terms of entrepreneurship.
I'm a traveling chef. I cater weddings. I cater private events. Anything you can think of, I cook. And outside of that, I have other different business ventures. I just recently ended my military career with the South Carolina National Guard, and I'm really just looking to open my market up, put my everything I love to do out there. Currently, still writing a book about my life, a memoir about my life, everything I've been through. Watching my brother go to prison, having my innocence taken, learning about my siblings' innocence that was taken I did not know about, So I had a chance to really, last year in 2020, probably been the craziest years of my life, but I gained so much by just dealing with myself and dealing with the ugly parts that wasn't allowing me to get to the better version of life, because if you carry it, you literally will, it'll make you feel like you wake up and you just got a dark cloud over your head, and so now that's what I do now, and I just talk to young men that have been through the same thing, at risk right here downtown Columbia, at risk youth programs that you got men dealing with the same things in the house to this day. You got the same young men and young women dealing with the same things, and I enjoy opening that window for young men and young women to voice, this is what happened to me, and then from there I help them pivot how to get past it. Yep. So that's where I'm at now.
Before we move to tour, what is the name of your catering?
Noel's Catering.
Are you
Noel's Catering? Yes, I am. Noel's Catering, Facebook, Instagram. That's my daughter's middle name. And you can find my book and you can read up on that. I got a cookbook as well. Okay. That's on Amazon. I don't know how to tell you. It's called Cooking with Noel's. We working on another cookbook as well. Working on a vegan cookbook and another kids-inspired cookbook. I'm working on that with my daughter. And DariusWrites.com. You can read up on my book. I will have a book coming out early summertime. Yep.
I am a birth worker, full spectrum, so I do postpartum, birth, abortion, pregnancy and loss, and I'm working on the fertility part. And you can find me online at liberation_doula. I also just recently founded Abundance Birthing Collective, and that's just a collective of doulas working to provide full spectrum doula services to our marginalized community members being impacted by houselessness, financial insecurities, and incarceration.
Thank you for sharing. Ashley, I'm going to let you close this out. I'm going to give you the final word.
No, I just, Darius and Tori, I just want to thank you for your vulnerability, your resilience, and, just your heart to be able to come do a hard thing and share. I know this decision was maybe harder for one than the other, but again, it was your choice to be here, and I am forever grateful. Our voice needs to be heard. There are people that need to be able to hear the story. And so that's really what I wanted to say, rather than inserting a plug.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
I'd like to thank all of you for having the courage to sit down with me today and have this much needed conversation. Ashley, if someone wanted to get in contact with you just to find out more, they may have information about this month or events going on this month. Can they contact you?
Yes, they can. If they on social media, Everyday Wellness SC is the IG and Facebook handles, and also 803-888-6714. Our admin assistant Peyton will be happy to gather those questions and information so that we can follow back up.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.